Welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
I'm Andrea Goyan. Elizabeth and I used to do improv comedy together in bars in San Francisco before we were legal. And then we lost touch.
And a few years ago, we discovered each other, found we're both legal, and we're both painters,
Performers,
animal lovers,
Pilates teachers.
naturalists.
Elizabeth, I am not a naturalist. I love nature, but I don't know where you thought that.
Well, loving nature counts. The point is
We're long
long
lost
lost
friends.
friends.
And we're both award-winning fiction writers.
After one of my short stories appeared in MetaStellar, we started this show.
MetaStellar is an online magazine, and we publish original science fiction, fantasy, and horror. There's a link below for more information. So today, we are delighted to have Carlos Allende joining us. Carlos is a media psychology scholar and fiction writer. He teaches for the writers program at UCLA, where I had the pleasure of taking his class called The Psychology of Compelling Storytelling. His newest novel, Coffee Shopping Murder Love, won the 2019 Quill Prose Award by Red Hen Press. He's appeared as a panelist at the LA Times Festival of Books with his second novel, Love, or The Witches of Windward Circle. He also works as a branding consultant doing research for television shows. So we are delighted to have you today. Welcome, Carlos.
Welcome, Carlos. First,
Thank you.
You don't have pets. I'd like to introduce our pet of the week,
Oh,
which is
nice.
my little morning dove. He's been sick, but he's getting all better and we'll be ready to go in a few weeks, we hope.
Elizabeth does bird rescue in the spring and summer every year and has hundreds of birds that pass through her house. It's crazy.
It is crazy, but this is a very sweet one.
So let's start off. We would love to just hear a little bit about your novel and maybe where the idea came up for you, how you came to this idea.
Well, thank you for having me. And
My
my
pleasure.
new novel is Coffee Shopping Murder Love. Oh, you cannot see it with the screen, but you can see it there in the background.
We did.
Oh, you have it there. So it's dark comedy. First and foremost, it's a dark comedy. It's not a romantic comedy. It has love in the title, but it's not a romantic comedy. It's a thriller, a dark comedy, and it's about two gay guys trying to get away with crime. So it's written in the first person, alternating between the voices of Jignesh Amin and Charlie Hayward. Jignesh is an Indian American. He works as a bookkeeper. He's bitter at life. He's in his 40s. And Charlie Hayward is from the South. He moved to California. He's very gay, very effeminate, very superficial, and very, he's waiting for a prince to rescue him. So they're the total opposites of I guess, of a gay life. One is bitter and angry, and the other one is super superficial and flamboyant, maybe. And they end up together by circumstances of fate, I guess. And at the beginning of the novel, Jignesh accidentally, not really accidentally, but he kills a office intern and he has to hide the body, and Charlie is selling a freezer. So he buys the freezer from Charlie, and there we start.
And everything goes wrong.
Everything goes wrong, yeah.
You can say, so this is a satire.
Yes.
Okay. And it's very, and I'm going off on a weird tangent for a second, because you mentioned the fact that it is alternating characters throughout. And then at the near the very end, correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you should mention that, because it's a surprise.
Oh, no. I mean, the fact that there's another
character. Yeah,
voice?
it is a surprise. It's confusing. It's in
Oh.
purpose to confuse people.
Okay, we won't
Okay,
talk
be
anymore
quiet,
about that.
Stop it. Don't listen to her. She's just ruined the book
She's-
for you.
She's ruined. She likes to ask her about movies. She'll ruin those too.
Yeah, don't go
Yeah.
to a movie with her ever. But what I
So-
wonder is
Oh,
you've
go ahead.
taken two stereotypes, two gay stereotypes that some people might find kind of like, like almost offensive. And yet you
Uh-huh.
managed to make them, in the end, people are rooting for them, even though they're not really very nice characters, if you will. So how did you come up, was that part of like their journey, our journey, both our journeys?
I guess it is part of the reader's journey. And we tend to say that we don't like stereotypes, and stereotypes are generalizations. So they tend to be negative, and many of them are harmful. And so it is not good to spread prolonged negative, harmful stereotypes. But we cannot avoid using them. That's the way we think. We have archetypes, stereotypes, they're shortcuts that we may have to make decisions. So we are always generalizing. And we tend to say that we don't like stereotypes in the stories, but actually we do. The thing is, we don't like stereotypes that we don't like, which sounds a little bit confusing. So you have to make your characters likable. However, my characters are not nice, and they're not moral people. They're morally repulsive. They're not even morally ambiguous. They do a lot of stuff that is wrong. And I never try to cheat the reader. The reader knows from the very beginning that what they're doing is wrong. But I wanted, part of it is an experiment. I wanted to demonstrate that we don't root for good people, which is what we normally believe. We base our affective dispositions on how those characters make us feel personally, us as readers. And what these characters do for us is they arouse our compassion because their distress is always evident. And they make us laugh because the story is funny. I'm a little bit, I should have drank more coffee this morning, but it is actually very funny. And I was reading a little bit of it. I wrote it, I have edited it many times, and I still can laugh when I read a little part of it. So, and that's why you like these characters. You end up liking them despite of how horrible, immoral, selfish, and horrible things they do. Because you are aware that their behavior is wrong, I don't think most people will think of them as a bad example, because you're aware that they're wrong, and you're not going to imitate that behavior.
Isn't part of it that they're aware they're wrong?
Yeah, the reader is aware.
They do know.
And the characters know as well that they have, but they're not very aware of their own misbehavior. But you're reading it in the first person, so it is also an example of how we tend to think of ourselves as nice people, and most of us are nice people, and most of us, most of the time, we behave, and we tend to think that the bad guys are other people, like the out group, some people over there that are not respecting the rules. But the bad guys could be also ourselves. We can break the rules, we can be selfish, we can be mean to other people. And my book is a little bit of a journey in the minds of selfish, horrible people. That's what, and I try to make the reader feel what it would be like to just go away with all the horrible people, impulses that you may have, and maybe learn from the experience.
I have a question for you, and I if I can phrase this right. So as a person who's immigrated to this country, as a person of color, how was it to write Charlie, who is so basically racist and awful? I mean, how did that feel to do that, and how difficult was it to kind of balance that line for yourself?
Well, Charlie ends up being very funny, and most people like him. I mean, some people don't like him at all, but I think most people like him. I wouldn't say he's racist, but he has some racist attitudes, and he has a lot of casual racism that he's not aware of. So he doesn't know, and he has a few comments that could be considered racist, and they could be offensive, but he's not really aware of them. And so
yeah, I didn't find him unlikable at all. I think he's very likable and kind of charming. But I wondered how that was for you writing that, and what you were hoping to kind of get across when you were writing that.
Yeah, part of it is making the reader aware of the things we say. And he happens to be white from the South because he's based on a friend of mine who's really, really nice. He doesn't have the racist attitudes that Charlie has, but he's very funny and he speaks a lot. And that's pretty much what I based my character on. He just talks and talks and talks and talks. But I wanted to call attention on the casual racism, that attitudes that we all, not only white people, we all have. Jignesh also has some of those comments, but I guess they're more apparent on Charlie. And some things are things that I have been told. Other are things that I learned that other people were told. And so when you see that in a book and you can experience from first person, you realize, okay, maybe I have said things like this myself. And it's not always right. And it is so evident on your face, but it's not, I'm not trying to shame other people. I'm just trying to call attention on that. People may have a laugh and see how wrong it is. And so I just wanted to call attention to certain behaviors that people do.
I think you did. I think you managed that well. Again, I was just sort of curious writing it, what that experience was like. Yeah, no, I think you managed that. Absolutely. Elizabeth and I were talking ahead of time, and I don't know what you'll have to tell us about this, but this book is not what we would consider speculative fiction. It's not. But your second book, I don't know about your first book because I don't speak Spanish well enough to have read it. But your second book is speculative fiction, would be considered speculative fiction because of the horror aspect of it. How different was it writing the two books for you? Did you find there were things you had to do differently, or was it pretty much the same? It just was a different genre.
Well, it was a learning process. And my first book, let me talk a little bit about my first one first. So I pretty much taught myself how to write, and I read a lot of the classics in my teens and 20s, and I fell in love with Balzac and Tolstoy and Victor Hugo and all those. So I wanted to write something like that. And my first book was
Can I ask you a quick question? I'm just curious. Did you read them in Spanish or English?
Yeah, translated to Spanish. And so I wanted to write something like that. I was living in Mexico at the time, and then but I didn't know how to engage people. I only knew how to write, and I was imitating other writers, and I was imitating people that wrote in other times, and it came out good. The first novel. I mean, people told me that I was a good writer, and some people liked it, but it was not that engaging. So I wanted to figure out how to engage people. With the second one was also like a learning process. I wanted to write about witches, and I had just moved to California, and I was working in Venice, living in Santa Monica, and I learned a lot about the history of Venice, California, and it's very interesting. And then I just mixed it. And I was fascinated by a book called The Hammer of the Witches.
Yes.
It's a treaty written by a priest in the late Middle Ages about how to prosecute witches. It has a lot of, I mean, it was a horrible book because a lot of women were burned and killed because of that book. but it could be a really funny book if you read it with that, I guess, mood, because it's just all these ridiculous ideas of how demons operate and how demons are made of air and they inflate the body, for instance, to get into somebody else's, etc. So I took some ideas of that and I mixed it with the history of Venice. Still, I was learning how to engage people, and I still was a little bit of an experiment. And so my latest book is, I could say, more user designed. So I went back to graduate school. I got a PhD in media psychology, and my focus was on figuring out why do we find some stories very engaging and why others not so much. And some very well written books can be really boring, and some poorly written books can be very, very engaging. So I wanted to know why. I mean, is it about dumbing them down? Is it about, I don't know. So I studied that, I figured it out, and then this is Coffee Shop and Motor Love is a book that I came with. And a lot of things I already knew, but you learn that with experience little by little. It's like trial and error, but I wanted to use science to figure out exactly what calls our attention.
Well, okay, what calls our attention?
But we want to do some more chat about that in our second segment. So did you, I don't know, but I mean, rather than get too much into that right now, can you tell us a little bit about how different it is, being that Elizabeth and I only write in English, how different it is to write in a second language? I mean, how challenging was it for you to write in English?
I remember that at the beginning, when I started writing the Law of the Witches of Windward Circle, I gave an early draft to a friend. It was maybe just the first chapter. And he told me, oh, it's cute, all those mistakes you have.
Ooh.
And he told me that I should continue writing in Spanish and then maybe translate it to English. And I didn't know that my English was that bad, but I just went back and rewrote it. And it's not, I mean, I consider myself fluent, and I'm not as good speaking English as I am writing English, because when you write, your accent doesn't sound and you don't make as many grammatical mistakes. And if you make one, you can correct it. So I would say, I mean, you learn writing from reading. And I want to separate, you learn to engage and you learn to write. They're different things. But you learn to write from reading, and I just continue reading in English. And since I moved here, I have been pretty much immersed in the English language. And I mean, I still speak Spanish occasionally, but I mean, that's part of the what you have to do. And difficulties, there are a lot of expressions that don't translate literally, and a lot of sayings and thoughts and ideas that are very difficult to translate. And similar sayings may exist in English, but maybe I don't know them and they're not as colorful. So I need to learn the colorful parts. And I remember I bought the book, which was very helpful. Let me see if I can show it to you. Give me 1 second. Oh yeah, this one. When I was writing straight from the fridge, Dad. So that means that someone is cool. He's so cool that he's straight from the fridge. This is a dictionary of hipster slang. So I was writing a novel set in 1959, and this was very helpful because I didn't know many of these expressions. One that I especially liked was referring to someone that was rich, that he has much dough than an army baker. And those are the kind of expressions that you don't learn in school, that you many times you don't learn from formal books, that you can only learn from cheap fiction sometimes, because many of these expressions are from pulp fiction from the 50s and 60s. And I just love them. There are many expressions in Spanish that I learned from my mom, or from, not even from TV, from listening to other people. If anybody has read Don Quixote, he has a lot of expression that still survive. And it's surprising because it's a novel from the 17th century. And many of them still survive, and they're spoken the same way. So this book was helpful, and I guess it's not too difficult. Once you are living here, you just immerse yourself in the language.
Yeah.
I don't try to translate. Translate is very difficult. I haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Can't even, yeah.
It's interesting though. Do you ever find like an expression maybe that you have in Spanish that you can translate into English that is like, then, you know, it's a whole nother description that's totally unique because, you know, of that, where it's like somebody says, wow, what an amazing description. And you're like, well, it was just a translation.
Yeah, I mean, let me think of something. They're maybe a little bit vulgar, but they're funny. So I remember my mom used to go play cards with some friends, and I have a scene in a novel that I'm writing now where some ladies are playing cards. And one of my mother's friends, she used to say "me cago cuadrado," which means I shit in the shape of a square, which doesn't make much sense in English. Or maybe I'm shitting bricks, something like that. Maybe I'm shitting bricks would be a proper translation. And but it was so funny when she said it, and it was so vulgar. And I was a kid, and I was like, oh my God, she's saying that again. And but it was so funny. And that kind of expressions, when I want to evoke the same feeling of these women playing cards, it's a little bit hard to come up with an equivalent in English.
So yeah, that is.
Or she would say, because Catholicism is not the main religion here in the States, and a lot of sayings in Mexico have to do with the church. She would also say Jesus de Veracruz, and that wouldn't click too well here in English.
So your book, I mean, by the time we have this out, your book will be launched, because it's launching on June 25th. Is that correct?
21st, and then the launch party is on the 25th.
Oh, okay, 21st and launches. And have you been having a good time? You seem all over the place, doing all kinds of readings.
Oh, yeah. So we started going to AWP in Philadelphia. That was in March, but that was like a convention of writers. So there were a lot of publishers there. So we were selling advanced copies of the book. Then I went to San Francisco 2 weeks ago. I had a reading there and a book club. And I've been having a few readings. I was in Mickey's Bar in West Hollywood last week. I'm going to another one in June 19, yes, at Village Well in Culver City. Then the launch will be in Santa Monica in Diesel, and from there I'm going to Dallas, then to Tulsa, then to New York, then back here to LA, then to San Diego, and that's so far what I have a schedule.
Very exciting, and it's a lot for and Red Hen is a fairly small I mean, they're, I don't know, medium press. They're a lovely press. I love what they do.
Yeah, they're not big compared to the big publishers in New York, but it's one of the biggest here in California.
Yeah, I've been made aware of them through some other writers. They're a lovely press. That's quite a book launch. I mean, that's really wonderful.
Yes, but I consider it a business, and I wish I was like Elena Ferrante, who just writes a book and forgets about it, and somebody else makes all the marketing, but we cannot all take that luxury.
Not
So,
at first, not at first.
yeah,
so.
not at first, probably, and it's a lot of work. Some people are not willing to do it, but you gotta do it. And it is actually a lot of fun when you're doing interviews like this one, or when you're doing a reading, or when you're actually selling the book with people. The not so much fun part is the planning, having to write emails, asking, and making sure that everything will be all right. But if somebody could help you with the planning, if you have a publicist, then you can just do the fun stuff. And I have a publicist. It's a good investment of money.
Good job. Yeah. Great.
And where did you find your publicist?
Red Hen gave me a list, and then I interviewed a lot of people. Well, not a lot, like 5 or 6. And so my publicist is Leah Paulos from New York. And it was just like, I mean, they were all lovely and they were all nice. And it was hard to make a decision, because you feel a little bit like, after talking to them, it's like hiring somebody for a job. Like, you like them all, but you can only choose one. And so I followed my gut, and I went with her. And so far, really, really good.
That's great.
So
Well-
they gave you a list to go through.
Recommendations, and then I looked other ones, and yeah, and some couldn't, some could, and I looked in advance.
Very cool.
That's really exciting.
Yeah,
Well-
and it is expensive, but I think authors should treat their book as an investment. If you cannot expect that somebody else will spend money in your book if you're not willing to. And I mean, if you have no money, that's a bummer. But if you have some money, and you could invest some on your own book, then you gotta do it. Just make sure that that is a sound investment. Treat it like your own company.
I think that's a really important
Yeah.
point
Yeah,
to
I
tip, to offer.
So
Yeah.
besides, so you're hiring a publicist. Have you hired anybody else to do any like graphics, or is this all just?
The graphics, I'm pretty good with them, so I did them myself. I mean, I love the design, the cover that was made by Vivian Rowe, and Red Hen Press chose it. I had no input on it, but I really liked it. And some people don't know that it's a freezer. It looks like a toaster, but it's a freezer. And it's very flamboyant and over the top, and it looks a little bit like a circus. And that's a book a little bit. It's a dark comedy. It's really dark, but at the same time is flamboyant and over the top and energetic. I don't sound too energetic today, sorry.
Oh, you don't have to sound, your writing's
Okay.
energetic, Carlos. You don't need to
Yeah.
be energetic. So.
So
Well, thank
yeah,
Go ahead.
I didn't hire anyone else. Just the graphics I did myself, and I worked together with the press. They've been very supportive, and with the publicist.
Great. Well, thank
Well, yeah, go ahead,
you so
Elizabeth.
much for talking with us about your
Yeah.
book. That's really exciting. I mean,
I know, it is.
yeah, congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
congratulations on winning the Quill Award for it. The Prose
Thank
Award,
you.
that's so exciting too. Nice to have that little blurb on the cover of your book.
Yeah.
And we usually end each segment with the best thing I learned this week. So, and I usually start because I'm just that kind of a person. So
You always are.
today, this was actually, sometimes I cheat, but I didn't. It was this week I learned this. Popping a champagne cork fires gas at supersonic speeds. So they did this computer simulation, and it reveals what happens in the microseconds after uncorking a bottle of champagne in full detail, which uncovers how different types of shock waves form before you're able to pour your champagne. So when you release the carbon dioxide, it causes a series of shock waves, many of which are actually faster than the speed of sound. And they say Champaign couldn't be considered a mini laboratory for the physics of fluids. And I thought that was pretty
That's
interesting.
pretty cool. And does it, is that what causes the sound,
Yes.
the pop? Wow. Wow. I guess it's kind of, you know, like whips are the same way. Like whips, the cracking of a whip is the same thing.
Oh, is it?
Whip cracks, that's what causes the sound.
Oh, yeah, except
Yeah,
not so
so-
much the gas, unless maybe the
Right,
person
not the gas,
getting
but the
has
sound
gas,
moves,
I
what
don't
in
know.
that moment creates that. All right, mine's really silly this week. So I was doing some research for something I was writing and wondered, you know, if you were starving in redwood forest and you saw a salamander, could you eat it? And the answer is no. Salamander's skin has toxin and it would make you, most salamanders, very sick. But also one other really little cool thing about salamanders is a lot of them don't have lungs. They breathe through their skins and the mucous membranes in their throat and mouths to get the oxygen. So it was just a little salamander lore that I learned this week.
Out of
And now,
curiosity, I mean, I have to. You're in a
I-
forest, there's all this stuff around. Why do you think, gee, I could eat the salamander? I mean, that wouldn't occur to me
in
like,
the story I'm writing, there's a salamander and the person is hungry. So why wouldn't they want to eat the salamander? That is why. They can eat lizards and snakes, but frogs, salamanders, toads, you got to be careful with those. And mushrooms, of course.
and mushrooms and berries and
Berries if you don't know them. So best
yeah.
not to be lost in a forest. That's the answer. So Carlos, do you have something you want to tell us about?
About that I learned this week?
Yeah, or you know, something odd or fun or weird or
Oh my God. Gee, what I have learned this week.
What amphibians you want to munch on?
yeah, amphibians you'd like to try or
Gaseous amphibians whose farts are faster than the feet of sounders.
I was doing research and for my current novel, and I didn't know that there was a punk club called The Mask. For those of you in Los Angeles, and it was below the Pussycat Theater on Hollywood Boulevard.
Mhm.
So it was the Pussycat Theater was a chain of pornographic movie theaters all over California, and they're kind of famous. They no longer exist. And it was interesting that there was a very popular punk club in the basement. So
that is funny.
that
So
is
now we
something
get
that
to
I
look
learned
forward to your
recently.
next novel with punk clubs.
Yeah.
And pussycats,
yeah.
pornographic,
Yeah,
pornographic pussycats.
Well, thank you again so much, Carlos. And you know, people go out, check out, let's see, my book is mystical here, but check it out. It's a lot of fun. Great characters that are the kinds you hate to love or love to hate. They're very morally ambiguous, but wonderful. So check it out. And
They will make you laugh, so that's
will
good.
make you laugh.
It will make you laugh while you're disgusted.
while
Always
you're
a
going,
good thing.
oh, yeah.
And we also thank you so much, Maria Korloff, for producing this whole thing. And best to Sydney Levinson. She's been a little ill. She's our editor, but I hope she's feeling better now.
And please, if you like this video, leave some comments below and be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification button so you won't miss any episodes. And if you want to support the publication, go to our Patreon page and help us out. All the money goes to pay the authors for new fiction. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.